The house was awake before the sun, not because it needed to be, but because he liked control. Lights clicked on in empty rooms, sensors hummed softly, and the marble floors held the night's chill as if refusing to let go. From the upper landing, he stood with his coffee untouched, watching the quiet choreography below, the careful opening of curtains, the measured sweep of a cloth across glass, the soundless efficiency of someone who knew how to exist without disturbing power. She moved through the space the way people like her learned to move early in life, deliberately invisible, never rushed, never careless. Every step was placed, every surface respected. He told himself he noticed these things because he paid attention to detail. He didn't tell himself the other truth, that he watched because he didn't fully trust. That distrust had roots he rarely examined. It had grown from stories told at dinner parties, from warnings whispered by friends who spoke as if they were being generous. It had grown from headlines and half-remembered anecdotes, from an idea of risk that always seemed to wear the same face. He would have said he was rational. He would have said he was cautious. He would not have said he was prejudiced. The idea came to him the night before, simple and clean, the kind of idea that feels justified the moment it forms. Leave the safe open. Just a crack at first, then wider. See what happens. Knowledge, after all, was power, and he liked power that felt earned. The study sat at the heart of the house, walls lined with books he rarely opened and art he'd purchased because it impressed the right people. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting, steel, biometric, flawless. He had opened it slowly, listening to the quiet mechanics, then stepped back and left it exposed. Inside were bundles of cash, documents, a watch that carried a story more expensive than its price. He arranged them neatly, not out of vanity but because disorder made him uneasy. He slept lightly, waking before dawn with the plan already running in his head like a loop. From the landing now, he waited, telling himself he wasn't eager, only curious. Curiosity sounded better. Curiosity didn't accuse. She reached the study door as the light shifted, the early glow cutting through tall windows. He leaned forward slightly, heart tapping faster than it should have. This was the moment. The test. The answer. She entered with her cloth folded just so, eyes scanning the room as they always did, cataloging what needed care. The open safe caught the light. He saw the exact second she noticed, the brief tightening at the corners of her eyes, the pause that wasn't fear but assessment. Time slowed. He imagined outcomes, each confirming what he thought he already knew. A glance over her shoulder. A hand that lingered. A choice made in silence. She stepped closer. His breath held. She stopped. He felt a strange disappointment, sharp and unexpected. He had wanted certainty, one way or another. He had wanted the clean line of proof. Instead, there was only waiting. She didn't reach inside. She didn't touch the cash. She didn't even lean in. She stood there, hands still, gaze steady, as if the open mouth of steel were a question she refused to answer alone. He chose then to reveal himself. The sound of his throat clearing cut through the stillness, deliberate and unmistakable. He descended the stairs without hurry, each step measured, his presence filling the space the way money always did. She turned. Her face showed surprise, yes, but not guilt. Not fear. Something else, resolve, maybe? Or restraint. I noticed something, she said before he could speak, her voice calm, respectful, unhurried. The safe is open. He waited for the rest. An explanation. An excuse. It didn't come. And? He prompted, letting the word carry weight. And I thought you'd want to know, she replied. He smiled, though it felt stiff on his face. Most people would have done more than notice. She held his gaze. Most people aren't me. The words unsettled him more than he liked. He had expected defensiveness. He had expected submission. Instead, there was a quiet boundary he hadn't anticipated. He walked past her, close enough to test space, to remind her who owned the house, the safe, the moment. He stopped beside the open steel and looked inside as if seeing it for the first time. A lot of temptation, he said lightly. Yes, she said. It is. The agreement surprised him. And temptation doesn't decide who we are, she said. Choices do. The clock on the wall ticked. The house seemed to listen. He felt something shift, a hairline crack in the certainty he'd built the test upon. He closed his hand into a fist to steady it. You could have taken something, he said. No one would have known. She shook her head once. I would have known. The simplicity of it struck him harder than accusation. He searched her face for performance, for the rehearsed humility he'd seen before in others. There was none. Just a statement of fact. He realized then how little he actually knew about her. He knew her schedule, her efficiency, the way the house looked better when she passed through it. He did not know her history, her reasons, the quiet code she lived by. He had not thought to ask. This was a test, he said before he could stop himself, the admission slipping out, heavy and undeniable. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't recoil. She absorbed the words, weighing them. I know, she said. He frowned. You do? You wouldn't leave it open otherwise, she replied. Not here. Not like that. The truth of it landed between them. He felt exposed in a way the open safe never had. And? He asked again, the word thinner now. And I don't like tests that assume my failure, she said, not unkindly. They don't measure character. They reveal bias. The word stung. He bristled instinctively, ready to defend himself, to list reasons, to cite statistics and stories. But the defenses felt hollow in the quiet room. I needed to be sure, he said, grasping for ground. Of what? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. The question forced him to look inward, to confront the uncomfortable truth he'd skirted all his life. Of her? Or of himself? She broke the silence. If you're worried, she said, you can close it. Or I can wait outside. He looked at the safe, still open, its contents untouched. The test had not gone as planned. The answer he'd sought had turned back on him, asking something he hadn't prepared to give. Stay, he said, surprising himself. Just stay. She nodded once and stepped back, hands clasped loosely in front of her, posture straight, unafraid. He reached for the door of steel, fingers brushing the cold edge. As he began to close it, he felt the weight of the moment settle fully. The safe hadn't exposed her. It had exposed him. The door clicked softly, final and precise, but the question it left behind stayed wide open, echoing in the quiet study as the morning light grew stronger. The tension didn't leave the room when the safe closed. It followed them into the rest of the morning, clinging to the corners of the house like humidity before a storm. He returned to his routine, but the routine no longer obeyed him. Coffee tasted bitter. Emails blurred. Every polished surface reflected a version of himself he didn't like examining too closely. She continued her work, steady as always, but something had shifted between them. Not in her posture or tone, those remained professional, unchanged, but in the air itself. Awareness had entered the space. Awareness was inconvenient. By midday, he found himself manufacturing reasons to cross her path. A question about inventory. A comment about schedules. Each interaction felt loaded, as if the house were listening, measuring. He caught himself studying her hands again, the same hands he had imagined reaching where they never did. The realization irritated him. That afternoon, guests arrived without notice, associates, friends of friends, people who treated his home like an extension of their entitlement. Laughter spilled into hallways. Shoes scraped marble without apology. He watched her navigate the crowd, invisible again, collecting empty glasses, ignoring the way conversations paused when she passed. Then it happened. One of the men, loud and careless, nudged another and nodded in her direction. Must be nice, he said, not lowering his voice. Help you don't have to watch all the time. The words landed hard. He felt the familiar urge to say nothing, to let discomfort pass like weather. Silence had always been his shield. But this time, silence felt complicit. She paused for half a second, so brief most people missed it, then kept moving. That pause burned itself into his mind. It was the same pause she'd given the open safe. Assessment. Choice. He followed her into the kitchen under the pretense of needing ice. "You don't have to tolerate that," he said, the words awkward in his mouth. She set the tray down carefully. "I tolerated worse before breakfast," she replied evenly. The casual honesty unsettled him. "I can say something." "You can't," she said. "Or you can notice." "What do you mean?" "I mean this isn't new," she said. "It's just louder today." The truth of it pressed on him. He realized how often he'd benefited from quiet, how silence protected him, smoothed his edges, excused his assumptions. He thought of the test again, how easily he justified it. Later, as the guests filtered out, he overheard another remark, this one softer, meant to be private. "He's brave," someone said. "Trusting people like that." Something inside him snapped into focus. Brave. Trusting. As if trust were a gamble and not a responsibility. He confronted the speaker before thinking better of it. The exchange was brief, uncomfortable, unfinished. The apology he received was shallow, more annoyed than sincere. Still, it was something. It was more than he'd offered her that morning. That evening, he called her into the study. The room felt different now, less like a stage, more like a reckoning. "I owe you," he began, then stopped. The words felt insufficient. She waited, patient but not pliant. "I'd put you in a position you didn't deserve," he said. "And I allowed others to do the same." She nodded, not absolving him, not condemning him. "Acknowledging it matters," she said. "Changing it matters more." He swallowed. "What would that look like?" "For starters," she said, "don't make my integrity a surprise." The line cut cleanly. He understood then how exhausting it must be to be constantly measured, constantly doubted, constantly expected to prove what others were allowed to assume. The conflict didn't resolve that night. It deepened. Over the next days, he noticed things he trained himself not to see, how often she was addressed without eye contact, how instructions were given twice, as if clarity depended on repetition. He noticed his own habits, the subtle ways he exerted control under the guise of order. And she noticed him noticing. One morning, he found the study rearranged, not dramatically, just enough to change how light fell across the room. "I thought it might feel more open," she said when he asked. It did. Uncomfortably so. The next test came unplanned. A document went missing. Panic rippled through the house. Accusations hovered unspoken but heavy. He watched the staff exchange glances, felt the old assumptions rising, ready to anchor themselves again. She found the document an hour later, tucked inside a book he'd pulled down himself. She placed it on his desk without comment. The relief was sharp. The shame sharper. That night, alone, he stared at the closed safe and understood the truth he'd been avoiding. The conflict wasn't about money or trust or control. It was about power. Who held it, who was denied it, and who paid the price for pretending it didn't matter. He realized then that the real escalation wasn't external. It was internal. And it was far from over. Somewhere in the quiet house, footsteps moved with purpose. He didn't know yet what he would do next. Only that whatever came would change everything, for both of them. The missing document should have been the end of it. A small crisis resolved, a lesson learned, a moment to move on. Instead, it became the fault line that split everything open. He couldn't shake the image of the paper resting calmly on his desk, returned without accusation, without triumph. She hadn't announced finding it. She hadn't asked for recognition. She had simply placed it there, as if the truth itself didn't require witnesses. That restraint gnawed at him. For the first time since he built the house, he felt like a guest inside it. The next morning, he arrived early to the study, earlier than usual, and sat in silence. He didn't open his laptop. He didn't reach for his phone. He waited. When she entered to begin her work, he stood. "I need to ask you something," he said. She paused, cloth in hand, and nodded. Go ahead. Why didn't you say anything yesterday? He asked. About the document. About how easily blame could have landed on you. She studied him for a long moment, then set the cloth down. Because I've learned something over the years, she said. When people are already suspicious, explanations sound like excuses. The answer hit him harder than any confrontation could have. That's not fair, he said automatically. No, she agreed. It's not. The simplicity of her agreement disarmed him. There was no bitterness in it, no plea for sympathy. Just a fact stated plainly, the way gravity exists whether you acknowledge it or not. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please, he said. She hesitated, just briefly, then sat. I grew up watching my mother clean houses like this, she said unprompted. Big ones. Expensive ones. She used to tell me something before every new job. She smiled faintly. She'd say, remember, your honesty will never be assumed, so guard it like it's fragile. He felt a tightness in his chest. That's a terrible thing to have to teach a child. It's a realistic thing, she replied. She wasn't trying to make me bitter. She was trying to make me survive. The study felt smaller. He thought of the test again, the casual cruelty of it, the ease with which he justified it. And the safe? He asked quietly. She met his eyes. That wasn't the first time someone tried to see if I'd fail, she said. It was just the most expensive setup. The words burned because they were accurate. He leaned back, hands covering his face for a moment. When he looked up, something in him had shifted. I don't want to be that person, he said. Then don't be, she replied. But wanting isn't enough. He nodded. Tell me what I missed. She didn't rush her answer. You missed the fact that trust isn't proven by temptation, she said. It's built by consistency. By how often someone chooses not to doubt you when it would be easy. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He realized how rarely he allowed himself to be uncomfortable, how quickly he usually smoothed things over with money or authority. Neither worked here. That afternoon, another incident forced his hand. A contractor accused her of misplacing equipment. The claim was vague but loud. Eyes turned. The old script hovered, ready to play itself out. He felt it, the pull of habit, the instinct to stay neutral, to let things resolve themselves. Instead, he stepped forward. She didn't, he said flatly. The contractor scoffed. How do you know? Because I watched you move it, he replied. And because she has never misplaced anything in this house. The silence that followed was thick and shocked. The contractor muttered an apology and left. No one laughed. No one argued. She didn't look at him right away. When she finally did, her expression wasn't gratitude. It was something deeper. Recognition. That night, she stayed late, reorganizing files he hadn't touched in years. He found himself sitting nearby, not supervising, not testing, just present. You didn't have to do that, she said, gesturing to the shelves. I wanted to understand, he replied. How much of this place runs because you're careful? She nodded. Carefulness looks invisible until it's gone. The turning point came days later, unexpectedly, violently. A break-in attempt tripped the security system just after midnight. Alarms blared. Lights snapped on. He rushed downstairs, heart pounding, panic sharp and unfamiliar. She was already there, phone in hand, calm amid chaos. They didn't get in, she said. But one of the motion sensors failed. How do you know? He asked. I checked the logs last week, she said. I told maintenance it needed replacing. He stared at her. You did? Yes, she said. They said it wasn't urgent. The realization hit him with brutal clarity. If someone had gotten in, if anything had been taken, the blame would have circled back to her. Not because of evidence. Because of expectation. He felt sick. After the police left and the house settled, he stood in the study again, the safe glowing quietly behind its painting. He opened it, not to test, not to provoke, but to retrieve a small envelope. He handed it to her. "This is yours," he said. She frowned slightly and opened it. Inside was a letter of recommendation already signed, detailing her work, her integrity, her vigilance. It named her for a management role with a firm he respected deeply. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." She looked at him, truly looked, as if weighing whether this was another test. "Is this guilt?" she asked. "No," he said. "It's responsibility." For the first time, she smiled fully. The anticipation hung between them, not of reward, but of consequence. Something had shifted irreversibly. The safe, the house, the power dynamic, all of it had been exposed. What came next wouldn't erase the past. But it would decide whether it meant anything at all. And for the first time, he understood that the bravest act wasn't leaving the safe open. It was leaving his assumptions behind. The envelope stayed on her table for 2 days before she touched it again. Not because she didn't want what it offered, but because she had learned to be careful with gifts that arrived after harm. Some things came wrapped in apology, and left a different kind of debt behind. He noticed she hadn't responded. The waiting was deserved. For once, he didn't try to rush it. Instead, he did something unfamiliar. He changed the rules of the house. It started small. Names were used, not roles. Schedules were posted openly, not whispered. Instructions were given once and trusted. When visitors arrived, he introduced her properly, not as help, not as an accessory to his comfort, but as the person who kept the place running. The way conversations shifted after that was subtle, but unmistakable. Power moved when it was named. There were moments he stumbled. Old habits don't dissolve quietly. Once, he corrected her in front of someone else, and caught the flicker in her eyes, the reflexive calculation, the instinct to shrink. He apologized immediately, publicly, without explanation. The room recalibrated. So did he. The real test, though he no longer thought of it that way, came when an audit uncovered discrepancies from years before, long predating her employment. The noise was loud, the scrutiny invasive. Lawyers circled. Consultants speculated. A familiar narrative began to form, ugly and convenient. He shut it down before it took root. "This stops now," he said, voice steady, to a room full of people who weren't used to hearing him draw lines. "Speculation without evidence ends today. And if I hear her name attached to this in any way, you're done here." There was pushback. There always is when comfort is challenged. He didn't bend. Later, alone in the study, he opened the safe again. Not because he needed anything from it, but because the sight of it open had changed meaning. He remembered the certainty he'd felt then, the smugness dressed up as caution. He closed it and turned away without looking back. That evening, she finally came to him with the envelope. "I read it," she said. "And? It's generous," she said carefully. "And overdue." He nodded. "I know. I'll accept it," she continued, "on one condition." "Name it." "You don't use it to tell yourself you're finished learning," she said. "No stories about how this made you better. No shortcuts to absolution." He met her gaze. "I won't." "Good," she said. "Because this wasn't about advancement. It was about safety." The word landed with quiet force. Safety. Not trust. Not kindness. Safety, the right to exist without being watched for failure. Her last weeks in the house passed differently. Lighter, but not sentimental. She trained a replacement herself, insisting on standards that had nothing to do with obedience, and everything to do with respect. When she packed her things, she did it without ceremony. On her final morning, he found a note on his desk. Not long. Not ornate. Character isn't what you leave open. It's what you close, on time, without being asked. He smiled, a small, private thing. Months passed. The house ran smoothly. He noticed when it didn't. He noticed people more. When he spoke about trust now, it was with humility, not performance. He corrected friends. He lost a few. He didn't miss them. One afternoon, a familiar headline crossed his screen, her name, attached to a role that carried real authority. He leaned back and let the moment sit where it belonged, with her. They met once more, by chance, in a public place where either of them held advantage. Conversation flowed easily, without the weight it once carried. "You seem different," she said, studying him. "I am," he replied. "Not finished. But different." She nodded. "That's enough." As they stood to leave, he hesitated. "There's something I never asked you." She waited. "When you saw the safe open," he said, "did it ever feel insulting? Or just expected?" She considered the question, then answered honestly. "Both," she said. "But I chose not to carry it with me." He exhaled. "Thank you?" She smiled, not forgiving, not forgetting, but satisfied. "You're welcome," she said. "Just remember, speechless isn't the goal. Changed behavior is." He watched her walk away, confident, unburdened, and felt the full weight of the lesson settle where it would stay. The safe had never been the test. The silence after had been. And what he did with it finally told the truth.